In today's video, Frey and I are going to be wrapping up our class build series here in Daggerheart. We're going to be giving you our final thoughts on each of the classes as well as the subclasses, ranking each of them from S tier to potentially D tier. So let's get into it. Alright, so Frey, let's start off with the Bard and particularly the Troubadour. So what are your thoughts on the Troubadour and where would you rank that between S to D?
All right, so for the Troubadour, I like the Troubadour a lot. I think this is your classic bard, right?
Yeah.
Um, and each kind of subclass builds upon itself in a really nice way. I try to look at it from all kind of aspects, right? Like mechanically, combat, are you doing well? Is it versatile? Is it fun, right? And I think the Troubadour in particular hits all those notes in a great way. Um, So for me, I would put the Troubadour at an A. I don't think it's overpowered. Like I don't think it's going to break the game like I think like an S tier might, but it's definitely a cut above the cloth of what I would consider like a B tier. Like B tier is where I expect a class to kind of be, like it's right there in the middle, and this one is just slightly right above that. Overall, I really like it. I love the songs, the buffs to the rally die. Like I said, just kind of builds upon itself really well. So that's where I would put an A.
Very nice. Yeah, I honestly agree with that because of the fact that it's an excellent class overall. The damage capability that you have, the ability to clear stress, heal hit points, be able to do a lot of hope handing out and things. I think the songs are really well done, from the foundation to the specialization and even to the mastery. I thought they did build on each other really well. Bard in general is just a great class, but the Troubadour is exactly what you would imagine, anyways, when you imagine a Bard. But yes, I really do think that it's an A. I almost would have put it at an S, just very close to being an S tier because it is
Very close,
really
very
good at
close.
doing a lot. And especially from the damage side, like you don't always expect the Bard to be able to do a good amount of damage, but between the weapons that actually leverage presence, which is what you're going to be using primarily as a bard anyways, to even the spells that you get from codex and a lot of the distraction and battlefield disruption that you can
I was
do
gonna say,
as a troubadour, it kind of almost pushed me to being an S tier for this one. But I do agree, I think it's a high A to an S for me. All right, so we are going to be putting this at an A tier here. It is definitely solid. It's not necessarily an absolute cut above for every single class that we've got out there, every single subclass we got out there, but we have kind of settled on Troubadour being an A tier sort of subclass. So then we are going to be looking at next our Wordsmith. So our Wordsmith, I think the Wordsmith is really well done as well. It's not as impactful, I would say, as the Troubadour, at least not from an overall group bolstering enhancement sort of thing. I think there is some good stuff. I like the way that it does help increase the rally die and really leverage that class feature you already have. But I would have liked to have seen the Wordsmith do a little bit more, if I'm being honest. But it's still good. I mean, overall, you've got all the Bard class features. You still have the Grace domain and the Codex domain, and those are a great combo together. But just looking at the subclass itself, it's not as great as I wanted it to be. And to me, I would say that this particular subclass is probably B to maybe a low A, but I think definitely a B tier for in my particular viewpoint. But what about you? What do you think?
uh, no, I agree in the B tier category for me. I even almost push this down to a C, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, just because the Bard carries so well, right? Like you could strip these
Yeah.
down, and the Bard alone with the domains and all that is just so good. But I think what like brings it solidly in B for me is just the situationalness of like some of the abilities, like Heart of a Poet. Right, impress, persuade, offend someone. Yeah, useful, right? Depending on the scenario, but like you're probably not going to be able to use that in like combat, right? Same with eloquent, uh, find a mundane object. Again, like these are just kind of it's useful when you need it, but it's finding the right time to use that. So that's why like I've probably put it in B solidly, closer down to the C tier almost, just because of the situationalness of kind of the features there. Very flavorful, I think, very fun. But as far as like power wise amongst the other subclasses, just not quite there and not a bad thing.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree with you. I think solidly in B is not a bad thing at all, because yeah, the Bard class does carry it a lot further. But just looking at the subclass in general, definitely B for sure. All right, so moving on to Druid, Fry, what were your thoughts on the Warden of the Elements?
So for Warden of the Elements, I really like the subclass. I'm a bit biased. I love anything kind of elemental based. So this one is definitely the top for me, just from a like a flavor standpoint, just a personal preference wise. But I do think it's just so versatile and flexible, like with all the elements at every tier, just kind of building upon itself, and you can, focus on tanking, focus on mobility, focus on kind of stress management, all that stuff. You kind of have everything at your disposal here on top of the already powerful arguably S tier druid on its own. And with the the beast forms and everything, I it was pretty hard for me not to put this at an S tier. And for me, an S tier is where it's arguably like too powerful. Like if you are an S tier subclass or an S tier class playing with people who are all in the B or C tier, like you're going to stand out and almost be overshadowing in a sense. And I think Druid as a whole can do that. And one of the elements, if you're kind of optimizing too much and your party's not, you're definitely going to tell with the Warden of the Elements. But I just think it can answer almost everything. Like there's always you can always contribute in some way. There's not going to be a lot of scenarios where you're not going to have a form or like an element that's not going to be helpful.
Yeah, man, I agree. Honestly, I would put it at an S tier as well because it's way too good. And on top of that, like no matter what character concept you have with this Warden of the Elements, you can't go wrong. You can build it and optimize it no problem, and you're going to be able to bring that particular concept to fruition every single time, and it's going to show. You are going to become the hero of the heroes. It's going to be a standout for sure. So yeah, and I agree with you. Elemental stuff is always one of my favorite things, anyways. And the way that they build it from foundation to specialization to mastery was really well done. It's just it feels so good when you do get to the mastery level and you're like, I am a god. And not to mention even what you get from the Sage domain as well as the Arcana domain. Those two hand in hand with the
Two
subclass
very solid
features.
domains.
Solid. With the class features and the transformations, killer. Absolutely killer. So yeah, I fully agree with you. We'll put this baby at the S tier here. Now, looking though at our Warden of Renewal. Warden of Renewal, I like Warden of Renewal because I think it's a good overall just kind of healer, but it's not like a standout to me overall for this class, for this subclass to be particular. Mainly with the mastery, I was kind of a little
Mhm.
disappointed by the mastery feature. What it was good and it was cool the fact that you could do some of the stuff while you're transformed. I wanted to see this extend to all the foundation and the specialization feature. I wanted to see that extend even further to all those to where you're able to do more. But it was almost like it was trying to pick a lane, like, and it really couldn't. It was like, okay, well, are we doing stuff with transformations, or are we going to be focusing more on the healing aspect? But I did want to see that open up a little bit more in the mastery. But overall, still a good subclass. I would put this more at a B for the subclass, if I'm being honest. Not as great as I wanted it to be, but still a solid player for sure.
Absolutely. No, I agree 100%. And I think what keeps it in the B tier, because I agree, is that bit that it kind of like wants to go into the beast form, but then while you're in beast form, you can't like do your healing spells, right? So
Yeah.
odds are if you're truly like playing into the subclass itself, you're probably not even using your beast forms as often. Um, so yeah, that really it is the master feature that brings it down because the first two are so great into the healing aspect. They play well, and then that one, I get what they were trying to do is like to give you an option of healing while in your beast form, but odds are you're not going to be using your beast form if you need healing anyways. This is more of a hey, we know we're going to win this fight, so I'm just going to pop beast form and yeah, I'll top you off too since I have the ability anyways. So yeah, I was bumping between B and A because I think it is really good,
It
especially
is.
like as a healing subclass, it is really good. Uh, and I think if we were just basing off like maybe if we are just talking tier one and tier two, it would probably be A tier. But if we're looking at it as a whole, yeah, B tier. As it gets up to those tier three and four, it's just not keeping up with those A and S tier subclasses.
Yeah, I think it's too little too late, to be honest, when it comes to that mastery feature. It's like you could have put that probably in the beginning, maybe, so that way we had something to
Yeah.
work with the entire time. But yeah, it just feels a little too late on that one. All right, so for Warden of Renewal, we're gonna put that at B tier because it is good, it is solid, but it's not as solid as we wanted it to be. It's not as great as we wanted it to be, but that's okay. All right, so moving into Guardian. Guardian is just something else as a class. It's really a great class, but looking at the Stalwart Guardian's so good. What were your thoughts on the Stalwart?
Uh, I I think I've said this in the past before. I think the Stalwart is as perfect as a subclass you can get. This is an S tier for me. It is so good. You have great combat, obviously, efficiency. You're so beefy, so tanky, so ready to play in the role of the Stalwart. This one, like, it is the tank class, and it gives you all the tools you need to be a tank class. And then, like I said, we'll get into the Guardian too, but like I love the Guardian. I think it is my favorite class. I think it's one of the best built classes. Stalwart is just up there for me. It's not much I can find wrong with it. Uh, like it contributes so much to the party. Like I said, you're great in combat. You have the yeah, I could just ramble on about it the whole time. I just think it builds well upon itself. It builds well upon the class. It meshes so well. So this is an S tier for me. You're going to be effective. You are going to stand out. You're always going to be contributing to the game in some way. And it is just a great subclass for me.
I agree completely. It is an S tier subclass for sure, and it's mainly because of the fact that it does such a great job from the tanking aspect, but you are a
Mhm.
great damage dealer just because you're a guardian as well.
Yeah.
Obviously the class features that go with it and the hope feature absolutely fantastic, and the combination of the domain decks just
Mhm.
make this subclass as good as it is right now. Like it is absolutely wonderful, and especially with that threshold increases as you go, you really cannot beat those things because as you're leveling up and gaining better armor, those thresholds are going to be off the charts by comparison to anybody else in your party.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, Stalwart is definitely up there for me, and I agree. I think S tier. I don't think there's any qualms about that one. S tier is exactly right. But looking at the
Mhm.
Vengeance subclass, I love the flavor on the Vengeance subclass. I thought that was just such a great idea of this like retaliatory sort of tank that's this frontline fighter getting after it, but you are focusing on the damage and you're focusing on, yes, kind of tanking, but you're mainly trying to damage and you're trying to be up there to hurt anybody that hurts your party or hurts your allies in any way, shape, or form. So I did like that a lot. I thought they each built upon each other really well from foundation to specialization to mastery. So for me, I would almost put this at a good solid A to maybe an S. Um, it's not necessarily your greatest damage dealer. It's solid in that aspect, and it's got a lot of good features, but I don't see it as completely an S tier for me, anyways. I would put it at an A, but that's just my thought processing. What is yours on Vengeance?
Yeah, so I agree on the flavor, right? I love Vengeance, for talking D&D, Vengeance Paladin was one of my favorites. I love the flavor of it. Do love the mechanics on it, the ability to kind of like strike back, right? For me, it's just not keeping up, I think, damage wise, right? If we're looking at
Yeah.
just the subclasses, because Guardian, as a whole, like does well. It's got the blade domain, so it's always going to kind of pump out good damage. And you are, getting those free hit points, but I think a lot of classes have options to that in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through their domains or through their subclass features as well. So I don't think it is super standout compared to the others. I personally had it at a B, which again, B for me is where a subclass should be. B is like, this is a good class. You're going to make effective choices, effective decisions. You're going to be a present on thing, but you're not overshadowing anybody in a way that like an S tier for sure, and sometimes an A tier depending on the situation. So I think with a B, it always kind of can contribute, or the vengeance can always contribute a little bit. There are just going to be obvious moments where you're probably not going to have influence on the decision like the stalwart is. So for me, it was definitely high B. I would even consider going up to an A for this one, just because it is so good. I think the Guardian itself carries it up there as well, just because, Unstoppable is so good, and I think Unstoppable plays well into Vengeance as a whole as well. So high B, low A for me.
All right, so for the Vengeance Guardian, we are going to put that at an A. We had a little bit of a discussion, but we're gonna keep it at an A at this point. We're gonna say low A to mid A at that point. it's mainly because of what the class features that you get between the Guardian's class feature and its Hope feature really helps this subclass along to being exactly what it should be. And so when we're looking at these, we're trying to consider all those particular points. And yeah, so we're gonna go with A with Vengeance. So looking at Ranger, Ranger was definitely an interesting class overall and very
Mhm.
focused in on the damage and such. But Beastbound for the subclass. What were your thoughts on the Beastbound Ranger?
For the Beast Bound, I overall I think it's good, right? It's not. I think we've discussed it in the Ranger video too. Like Rangers aren't usually my favorite class. I don't think, especially here, like it's definitely a good class. It's just the flavor wise for me, they usually just don't build it too well. The caveat of that is I do love a good pet class. So the Beastbound I really liked. I thought it played well. It has a good balance to it. Sure, you have your pet, but you're not getting those like you're not controlling action economy with it, right? I think Daggerheart as a whole settles that pretty well as far as like spotlighting and all that stuff. It just really just increases your versatility. It's basically giving you a second character to have in position. You can kind of attack from wherever you want, so to speak. So it's really just kind of expanding your options. So mechanically, it is an excellent subclass. I think just where it falls short is part of the like kind of the synergy with the other classes, right? I don't think it, uh, not necessarily in a bad way, but it's not like playing off of anyone else. You're kind of just playing off yourself because you just have the pet, and there's just the kind of like aspect to it. Uh, Overall, though, like I think in the bubble of a tier, right? I do think it is sitting in the A for me. There's not anything that I can pinpoint that is bad about it. If anything, it has plenty of options, and just with like your companion, you're just kind of doubling what you have. They have their own experience, their own level up options and stats. So overall, you kind of get to have two characters in one, or maybe like one and a half characters, right? So it's just nothing bad about it that way, but it's not in a way that's overpowered that would send it up to an S tier. So for me, it is sitting in the A tier, uh, just because of that versatility aspect of it.
I agree as well with the A tier assessment, mainly because of the way that you're going to probably end up building your Beastbound character anyways, because that companion is going to be a huge deal for you and your character. So moving forward together in the way that they built this subclass from foundation to specialization to mastery was actually rather nice, particularly with the options that you have to expand what your beast is actually capable of doing. So it's actually rather nice to see that the pet's not really taking away from the ranger, but in fact aiding and complementing and pushing you forward as a ranger. I didn't put it at an S mainly because it doesn't give you a lot of versatility as far as like
Mhm.
the whether you're doing ranged or melee damage. It almost
Yeah.
encourages and forces you into doing melee damage primarily,
Mhm.
just because you want your beastbound companion like right next to you. You want your companion there with you, attacking and doing this kind of in tandem sort of thing. So it's more of a Dritz or Erden rather than kind of that
Yeah.
classical sort of like ranged ranger getting after it. You're looking to
Mhm.
be up front, doing a couple of weapons and just going after it damage wise. So that's why I do think it. I mean, it's good from that standpoint. Absolutely fantastic from that standpoint, and the way that you can use it from a rest standpoint as well, like actually utilizing it during rest to
Yes.
help aid you in that recovery. Really nice. The hope, having that extra hope to go with it, really nice as well. So I do like it from that standpoint. So I do agree. I think A tier is exactly where it should be. It's not going above and beyond, but it's also not falling behind in any way, shape, or form. So all right, then looking at the Wayfinder. The Wayfinder was a different situation to be sure. I would say that this is one that actually leans on the lone ranger kind of idea, that individual that's
Mhm.
going by themselves, that chose not to have a beast companion in any way, shape, or form, and is basically a hunter. Not maybe not even necessarily a ranger in the strictest sense of the word, but definitely more of a hunter. Just the way that they built the foundation to even all the way to the mastery with that apex predator and the elusive predator. Like you're really honing in on that evasion capability with the potential for good solid melee and even ranged. I will say it does a good job from allowing you to do that ranged sort of damage rather than like the Beastbound getting you more into the melee. Especially with Ranger's Focus, I do like Ranger's Focus a lot. It gives you a lot of options, especially with the Hope feature as well. That can be really cool because it doesn't specify melee range with that Hope feature, so it's very nice complement with the Wayfinder, so you can be doing range damage and then go ahead, spend 3 hope, and do that to other people as well. Fantastic. So I see the Wayfinder as also an A, just because it does really good at, it's really good at what it does and is a little bit better than I think a B tier would necessarily be, but that's just my thoughts. What are yours?
Yes, I think the Wayfinder, like you said, is on turret. It's definitely good at focusing down a target. It's got really good burst in in that ruthless predator. You're once you have your like focus on your target, you're going to just be better on that focus and that target. For me, because of the kind of single focus that the class is on, it had me leaning towards the B tier more just because you kind of have your niche and you're really good at that. You're really good at, taking your focus and being good at that. You get your evasion against it. You're doing more damage against it. Uh, you can remove fear right on your focus as well if you're attacking them. So it is really good at what it is good at. And then outside of that, it doesn't have too much to add as far as, are you it kind of relies more on the class features, not in a bad way, but like you said, it does have that AoE option, but it's because of the class feature, not necessarily the subclass. The subclass isn't adding too much outside of just building on that focus, uh, which is not, a bad thing, but because of that kind of singular focus, I had me leaning more towards B tier. But when you are in that scenario, when you are like, okay, this is the big bad, this is the guy we have to kill, I'm going to focus on it, you are an S tier at that point because you are one of the few that are kind of built for that exact scenario. So for me, B tier teetering on A tier a little bit.
Honestly, I agree with that assessment, and I will concede that it is a B tier, and with a very circumstantial A to S tier moment when you're in your element with that particular subclass. So yes, B tier for our unfortunate Wayfinder. That's okay though. So then looking at the Rogue, uh, mainly the Nightwalker Rogue. The Nightwalker Rogue is so good. What were your thoughts on the Nightwalker Rogue?
The Nightwalker Road, I love it. I love the way that it plays, right? The teleporting, the damage that you get, the way the subclass builds upon itself. It really highlights the class feature itself as well, right? It's got a lot of play with the cloaked condition, keeping you in the cloaked condition as much as possible to get you that extra sneak attack, get you all that movement. It is really, really great. For me, that puts it at an A tier. I think it just is really good. It's not super overpowering. You're not overpowering every scenario, but for what the rogue is capable of doing, it is really good at it. And it, with its domain as well, right? It does do really good damage as a class, and then its domains kind of cover its gaps. So you have Midnight that really plays into it, but then you have the Grace that kind of shores up that like you're really good at combat, and then Grace kind of helps you be really good at the social aspect of it. So when you're looking at the class as a whole, that really rounds it out. I think it's just a very well-rounded subclass when you take into account the class itself. So for me, it was an A tier. Could be an S tier, right, in the right scenario, but I think overall A tier just because it does have a lot of versatility because of the domains that it has paired with it.
I agree as well. I put it as a very low S to a high A for that very reason because it is absolutely incredible at what it does as far as damaging and getting into where you really shouldn't be and never letting a single person survive. Like I think that's absolutely incredible when the goal is to massacre the entire field. But that's only one scenario where it's going to be that S tier kind of moment. It is going to be A tier overall because you're going to be able to infiltrate and do all these things and leverage those class features really nicely. I like that it gives you something that builds even further upon it and not necessarily being completely incumbent upon it, but it gives you so much more to work with that then leverages those class features instead of just trying to enhance what the class feature already gives you. It's trying to work in tandem with it rather than just rely completely on it. So I do love that about this subclass. Very well done from the foundation all the way to the mastery, and it is terrifying. Like, that would be a terrifying individual to come into contact with. But I agree, because it does get shorn up from its gaps because of the Grace Domain deck. And the Midnight was just perfect to help aid and abet
Mhm.
all the things you're already doing anyways and just take it to a whole new level. So I do firmly agree that this is an A tier with that circumstantial S tier kind of moment. But
Mhm.
that sort of leads us, I suppose, to our Dear Syndicate subclass. Syndicate, I thought, was very interesting in terms of the way that they were trying to leverage what Daggerheart is about, being about the narrative, being about all the things that is story focused. You know, I love that portion of it, but this subclass leans a little too hard into that without
Mhm.
giving you anything else to work with. So where our Nightwalker Rogue was very much so about the damage dealing and just wrecking the field, the Syndicate Rogue here is a little bit different in that aspect, and on the opposite side, it's more heavy on the socializing. It does have some good damage, it does have some good options to it, but for me, this is definitely an A tier. It does what it does really well, but it also is good for a lot of different things. So you're not just pigeonholed into just socializing. You do have those damage capabilities, but it is very strong when it comes to supporting, and primarily when it comes to like information gathering, infiltration, deceiving, doing all those great things that you would want a rogue to be capable of doing. And I just love the fact that you get these little like helpers and these allies that come out of the woodwork. There's a few moments where it's a little clunky in its description, and so from a GM standpoint,
Mhm.
that's a little tough to kind of work into the story properly, especially when an ally would randomly come out of nowhere and like take the hit, or help shield you. Like, was he there the whole time? Was he just waiting for the right moment? What was going on there? So aside from a little bit of clunkiness in that description, or why that would even make sense, you would have to of course make that work story wise, but aside from that, I do think it's a solid A tier. But what were your thoughts?
Oh, I'm torn because I love the Syndicate. I love the flavor. I love what it does, what it's trying to do, the way it plays. Uh, the only the main thing that drags it down for me is that it is very GM and campaign dependent, right?
Yeah.
So you have to make sure you're working. This is a subclass. Like if you want to play this, you have to make sure there is a session zero, and you have to like tell you, hey, I want to play this. Is it going to be relevant? Because if you don't do that, you pick up the syndicate, and then it's like, oh, hey, we're playing just a dungeon crawler. We're not actually doing a lot of social interaction. The whole subclass now is kind of moot. Uh, so because of that, I had it at B tier just because of the dependence on the scenario. And
Yeah.
while I do agree that, yeah, they do slip in some damage there, I feel like it was just there just to say, if you have no other thing to use this on, cool, you can add this 2d8 damage. Uh, but I don't think it definitely would never be the option I pick. Once per session, I'm not adding 2d8 damage to a roll. I want that handful of gold. I want that bonus to my results or something like that, something that's a little more impactful. So for me, if we were just going off flavor alone, right, or if you're in the right campaign, if you were in a social, political something campaign, this is an S tier. But if we're looking at it as a whole, I would put it in B tier just because it is kind of in the same thing as like the Wayfinder, right? Like when it's good, it is amazing. When it's not, it's still good because you're still a rogue, and a rogue is fun. But you're not going to. There's going to be several scenarios where I think like you have all these cool abilities, and they're just not going to be helpful.
I will concede on that one as well. I do agree, because it is very circumstantial, and you should have that sort of understanding where when you're getting into your campaign. Is this going to be in the city? Is it going to be just straight up exploration, and we're going for long bouts without ever seeing a single building? What are we working with here? So yeah, that I do agree with that, because it can be very unfortunate if you go that route and it's
Mhm.
just exploration, or it's just dungeon delving, then you're effed. But if you're in the city, this thing is going to be top of the top. You are going to be the
Oh yeah.
standout constantly. I will also agree that I wish that the frequency of the subclass features
Mhm.
were a little more often, because you can do a lot in one session, and it kind of kills it. So I would have rather, instead of like once per session, but maybe more of a once per long rest perhaps, or something that would give a little bit more utility to these features, so that way you're not feeling like almost like spell slots in D&D where you're trying to hold back a little bit and save it for the right moment, then you end up never
Hmm.
using them. So yeah, I agree though. B tier for sure. Let's look at our Seraph though, because our Seraph is just an absolutely beautiful class. But let's talk about the subclasses. So first off, Divine Wielder. What were your thoughts?
Fine Welder, I put this one at an A tier for me. I'll say that right off the bat. I love the Divine Welder. I think it's got a lot of good going for it. You know, Spirit Weapon is great. I love the flavor of it. I love the versatility of it. Uh, you get a little bit of damage options. You get the multi attack or like multiple targets, right? You also get a little bit of healing that is already building upon the healing that you have as the Seraph. You have your prayer die, which you're getting a little more versatility out of that. You get your additional roll, so you're like always going to probably have a good prayer die going for this one. And then for the mastery feature, that is insane, right? Getting a
Yeah,
chance to basically double your damage if you're just have that matching damage die. So for me, solid A tier. I don't think it's quite S. I think it's sitting right where it needs to be. There might, be a scenario or two where you truly shine, but I don't think it would be in a way where it's like coming up so often that it's a super standout, super like S tier rank. So A tier for me. That's a great subclass. Great subclass.
I agree. A tier as well, too. A very high A tier for me personally, just from the standpoint of the versatility that you have with this subclass, from healing to damage, and then obviously what the class and the class feature and the hope feature give you, plus all your domain deck picks. There can be some really great domain deck picks. I mean, but we're not necessarily rating the domain deck cards at the moment. But with those combos and everything else, it really aids this subclass to being able to be an S tier in those very specific combat focused moments. But just looking at the subclass in general, definitely an A tier. It is really good at what it does, and it has a lot of capability. Gives you the ability to be more tanky if you really want to be, and doing that damage. You can do it from range, you can do it from just up close if you wanted to. Be able to do the healing, fantastic. At any rate, yes, I do think it's an A tier as well. It's just, it's really good, but it's definitely not like, holy crap, this thing is insane. So, yes, we're going to put that at A tier. But then that brings us to our Winged Sentinel. Our Winged Sentinel is really, really good. I do like this. I love the flavor with it, obviously. That mobility that you get from being the Winged Sentinel is wonderful. The damage capability as well. The ability to pull fear from the GM. Like, love that. Absolutely love that. So for me, this was also A. I thought this was really well done. Not necessarily completely stand out. You do have a lot of capability here, but it doesn't feel overpowered. It does feel really good. I mean, I've just the ability to pull fear from the GM. So yeah, I do think it's really good. To me, it's an A tier. Fantastic. Not overly stand out though. But what were your thoughts?
I I completely agree. I also had this one as an A tier. I think the Seraph as a whole is just an A tier. It's just like
Yeah.
slightly cut above the rest. It's just really well made. You're just trading in, that kind of healing a little bit that you get from the Divine Wielder, and you're trading that in for a little more damage, a little more mobility, right? So you're
Yeah.
getting advantage on your attack rolls if you're using a presence weapon. So I think that's what keeps it kind of balanced too, right? Your spell casting is your strength, but you have all this bonuses to your presence, so it keeps that in line. I think if those two things matched, it would have bumped it up to an S tier just because you wouldn't have to worry about which one you're balancing out. But you're getting advantage on your attacks, the extra damage on your attacks. Not only are you flying, but you can help reposition your party members as well. I think that kind of flies under the radar when you think that since opportunity attacks aren't really a thing in this game, you really can truly go ahead, grab your friend, get out of dodge really quickly with maybe just an agility roll, right? Depending on how far you're going, you don't have to worry about them getting hit on the way out or yourself. So just from that, the mobility, the party mashup, like this works very well within a party because of that, and you just get a little bit of everything in a good way. Sometimes if you're spread too thin, it doesn't work out. But I think here you kind of get a jack of all trades kind of aspect between
Yeah.
between all those things, and it works out really well for the Seraph. So solid A tier for me.
I agree as well, and I didn't even think about that presence aspect of it. The presence does bring it down a little bit. Perhaps if the spell casting was the exact same, being presence as well, this thing would be definitely up there. But since it's not, it actually throttles it back just a little bit. So yes, A tier for sure. A tier for sure. All right, so moving on to the sorcerer, looking at the elemental origin. What were your thoughts on elemental origin? This one was definitely interesting, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this first.
Right. So I tried to look at this very, you know, I don't know if subjectively is the right word, right? Because as a class, right, sorcerer, I think it's okay, right? I think as a whole, the sorcerer is a B tier class,
Yeah,
maybe even C tier. Like, I'm not a huge fan of it. I think overall maybe B just because it's functional. So, but if I'm looking at just the subclass and like what the subclass does and plays into the class itself, just through that vein here, I put this at a B tier. You're again, it's kind of matching the class. It's not anything super overpowered, and I don't think it has any point where it's going to overshadow, right? Even taking into account the domains. Like Arcana is good. I think out of the arcane ones, Codex is better. So Arcana,
yeah,
good, but not the best. Again, with Midnight, Midnight plays more into a rogue than I think it does a sorcerer. Uh, and so with you get the elemental stuff, you get to, spend hope to add damage or results to your roll. It's very basic, and I would say that it's just kind of like adding bonuses to kind of what you're already doing, and it's not making anything super stand out. So I would put it at a B tier just because it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's meshing with the class. It's not doing anything stand out. It's just kind of giving you some numbers. It's just adding some numbers onto what you're already kind of doing, and it's not doing anything crazy.
yeah. I agree. Even when you take into account what you're getting from the hope feature, from the class features,
Hmm.
nothing really did stand out. I mean, it's obviously geared towards damage. The subclass itself has fair amount of flavor to it. It's okay, but it doesn't really hone that in for you as a player or a GM rather. Even it just wasn't as like it wasn't as pinpointed as I wanted it to be, and it was a little all over the place. The subclass was good, and I agree. I think it is a B, perhaps a C, but it is functional. It does do
Yeah.
the damage. It gives you the numbers. It's just not a standout class by any stretch of the imagination. I feel more of a C tier by comparison, especially when you're looking at some of the other
Yeah.
things that we have as a B. This is definitely a C for me. It is good. It is good. It's just I don't know. It doesn't have a wow factor in there. There's nothing that goes, oh wow, hey, great, that's cool. You are definitely a sorcerer and an elemental one at that. It's just it kind of
Yeah.
meh for me.
And I would even concede down to a C2. A B is like me giving it the benefit of the doubt. Like it's really not
Yeah,
doing anything for me. And even like looking at it again, we talk in the beginning of our talks like, oh, we love elemental stuff, and here it's just like, oh, hey, just pick an element, and when you do that, you're looking kind of better at it. Okay, like you could have at least like said if you're adding air to it, you get this kind of rider with the spell. Like if they'd have gone to that aspect of like adding kind of riders and like additional abilities as opposed to just a flat two bonus or flat +3 to a damage roll. Um, I don't know. Like this is a very meh class in general for me.
yeah,
So yeah, I'll concede to a C tier for that one.
yeah. I agree. I really wish it was a little bit more, a little bit better. But what can you do? What can you do? So C tier for sure. We got that there. But looking at the primal origin, I think this one was a little more disappointing than I had first expected when we first started doing our class builds. And trying to read through it, I was just like, I don't know what to do with this thing necessarily. And that even persisted when I re looked at it to give it that, like you said, the benefit of a doubt, hoping for something a little bit more. But I don't know. What were your thoughts on this one?
That pretty much. No, but B tier for me is where I originally kind of had it. I both had these at B. Uh, this one, maybe in the right scenario, could be an A, right? I think the manipulate magic, its foundation feature really carries it most, just because it does kind of give you the option of, at least doubling up your damage die, hitting an additional target, extending range, I think, can be underrated just depending on the scenario. I think that you're basically getting like meta magics, right? If we're talking D&D Lego, it's just giving you kind of more versatility with your spells as opposed to just like a flat damage roll or a flat bonus roll. At least you have some options as well. I think what brings it down as well is that the features don't really build upon each other. I feel like I just got three features uh, that they don't really do anything with each other,
Yeah.
which is such a like a standout compared to every other class here. Like every other class has the foundations have been kind of building or the features have been kind of building on each other, and here it's literally that none of them have anything to do with each other. Even like when you get to the mastery, it's like, oh, hey, you also get this thing called charged, which has like nothing really to do with the class itself. It's just like you randomly get this new like kind of a condition like status on your character, whereas like at least the rogue had cloaked and it like built upon the cloaked, and this one just kind of throws a form at you. So uh, B B maybe, but willing to move up or down.
Honestly, it was too disjointed for me, and so when looking at it, like building on the points that you had here, when looking at it, it just was too disjointed for me to build a
Mhm.
real character off of, and it be satisfying in any way, shape, or form. I really did try, and I gave it so many character tries, so many character concepts to just see how I could make this work in combination with the class feature, the hope feature, and the domain deck picks, not even getting into the domain decks that are associated with this class at the moment. Yeah, to me, I've put this sucker at a D, if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
highly disappointed by this one. And I hate to be that guy, but it's just like I guess there had to be one class that was just a D move. It just was
yeah.
not happening. But that's my assessment. I don't know. Where do you want to put this thing at?
Honestly, I think a D is where it belongs, and it's really just because it is so disjointed. I think if they honestly, I think they should have just scratched the specialization and mastery, and each feature should have just been more things you can do with your spells. Like maybe adding a subtle spell in there so like your magic isn't noticeable by people if you spend the stress, and or even expanding it to hit like two targets instead of an additional one. Like just building on that and like you just unlock more of those as you go along would have been better than what they had here. Uh, because the foundation feature I think is really all it has, and the other two are just kind of like cool when you get them, but
I agree. So D is where we're gonna put this sucker, and I agree.
yeah.
Definitely, they should have just scratched out the specialization, the mastery, and just built on what they have with the foundation, and even try to incorporate what you could with the actual class feature and make that a little bit more on top of what you're building from the foundation. They could have gone so cool with this to the point where it could have been an S tier, in all honesty. But
Hmm.
they just I think they failed in that particular standpoint, and I hated to see it because the sorcerer is normally my favorite kind of class, but
Hmm.
yeah, this definitely went worse than I had expected originally. So at any rate, though, let's now get into the warrior. The warrior was so much fun, but particularly the Call of the Brave. Call of the Brave. What were your thoughts on the Call of the Brave?
Ooh, Call of the Brave. Really enjoyed Call of the Brave. I enjoyed the Warrior as a whole. Warrior and Guardian are two. I like Marshals in general, and Warrior and Guardian both just scratch that itch for me here. Whereas Guardian, has that tanky aspect. The Warrior has more of that damage and hard charging aspect, and I think the Brave covers that really well. You are a hope generator for yourself, right? You're getting hope basically 4 out of 5 rolls, if I'm thinking about that right. So you're just constantly generating hope. You get some stress clear, some hope clear. You can even go up to that D20 hope die, right? If you kind of build for it. And I think building for the class is what puts it at an A tier for me. You do have to kind of play into it with that rise to the challenge. So like we did in our video there where I did the orc and all that, so I can kind of maintain that low health aspect uh, to really capitalize on it. Not a bad thing. I don't think I'd have a problem doing that in a normal game as well. The flavor of it is obviously also really great. You do get attack of opportunity just as a class, which is really cool to have it unique to the class. So it gives you even more kind of like stand out for it. So for me, yeah, it is an A tier. You're helping out your party with it, better tag team roles. You have that D20 Hope die, which is like super unique and super cool to like play off of if you can get to it there. And then you're gaining so much hope. So I think it plays so different in a good way, I think, compared to the other kind of like melee classes and classes in general, that it was just a standout for me there at the A tier.
Yeah, I agree. I do also think it's an A tier, but it's also really good at just being a part of the party. And I think that's what's been so nice about a lot of these classes and subclasses is that it's just aiding in your ability to work with your fellow teammates, being a part of them rather than trying to be really cool as an individual with other people that are trying to be really cool as individuals. I think Daggerheart does a great job of that, and in these subclasses, more often than not, not all of them, as we just recently saw, but more often than not, they tend to do really well at bringing in that team play, helping the party out, bolster your friends, and not necessarily just you being cool. And I agree. I think Attack of Opportunity is just way too cool for school. I love that it's such a novelty kind of moment that this is the only class that gets it. Nobody else gets it. No adversary has this. It's just really nice that it's this one class that has it. So yeah, really great class overall, but the subclass definitely an A for me as well. I do agree with that assessment, so we'll throw that there with the A tier. Now looking at the Call of the Slayer for me, I thought was really a lot of fun. Just an absolutely fantastic subclass. Mainly when you're focusing in on that damage. Like you want to talk about dealing damage, this thing is going to just take you above and beyond when it comes right down to it. I mean, it's competing with the Nightwalker Rogue with ability to deal out
Yeah.
damage. Between not only the combat training class feature, but in comparison with the actual Slayer dice themselves, that amount of damage is nuts. And when you're rolling a lot and you're gaining all that hope, especially if you build out your ancestry, your just overall heritage right, you're going to be gaining so much hope anyways. You're probably going to just be pumping it all in the Slayer dice and you're just going to keep going at it with that damage. So thought it was absolutely great, but it was in this one vein. It doesn't have a whole lot else going on until you do hit the mastery. I do appreciate the mastery feature where you are
Mm.
basically giving that Slayer dice to everybody else, where they can each gain that Slayer dice as well, which is such a cool thing. Again, subclass being able to help out the party. Love that about Daggerheart, and it is exemplified here with the mastery feature of martial preparedness. Fantastic. So yeah, for me, this is an A tier, almost to an S tier, but it's an S tier in that specific thing. But overall, I think an A tier sort of subclass. But what were your thoughts on the Call of the Slayer?
Uh, I really don't have much to add. I think you hit all the key points. I agree as well. It is an A tier. I think the what keeps it balanced right is that you're not gaining hope when you're
Yeah,
collecting your Slayer dice. So the fact that you are that is a good trade. That is a if it wasn't that trade, if it was anything else, I think it might bump it up to an S tier or even drop it down to like a B or a C, depending on like what the trade-off was. But I think
yeah,
not gaining the hope to gain that D6 and being able to store those up is a like a perfect kind of one for one swap. And then, like you said, with that mastery feature, being able to give those D6s out to the party as well. It's just the warrior, both subclasses, like you said, just just mesh so well with the party.
yeah.
Mesh so well with the party. The features are solid, but I think it shines in how it kind of interacts with the other characters there. I think the warrior is really good, or the subclasses especially are really good at making you interact with the party and buffing them without like, being a healer or being that bard giving out the rally die and the grace stuff. Like it builds in a way for you to interact with the party that isn't outside of the scope of what a kind of a martial character is. So yeah, solid A tier for me there.
I agree. A tier. We are one and the same on that one. It is definitely an A tier sort of subclass, and for all those points, it's just wonderful. But now let's look at one that I think was a bit of a surprise, and that's the Wizard. The Wizard, I wasn't expecting. I remember back in Open Beta 1.5, I did not like the Wizard initially, and it's because it doesn't conform to the original ideas that I think we all have for the wizard, at least what we're all used to, at least coming from D&D. But what these subclasses and just the class features as well as the hope feature itself do it's just a different sort of wizard, and it's really good when you kind of change your mind on what you think a wizard is. And so, looking at the subclasses, particularly for School of Knowledge, what were your thoughts on School of Knowledge? Because I think this was probably the most surprising one out of all the subclasses here in Daggerheart.
For sure. The School of Knowledge is really great. It's all about experiences, which I think are, obviously a key aspect of Daggerheart. I think it's one of the things that makes it such a just a fun system. Having those experiences, being able to utilize those, and it's just making those things better. You're getting more domain cards. You're reducing your recall costs situationally, so you can it swap those out more. I think what I love about it the most is it just highlights all the different aspects of the game. If you really want to dive in and like really just get in the nitty-gritty of recalling and swapping domains, having domain cards, having better experiences, like all those things that make Daggerheart like Daggerheart, this touches on all those things in such a great way. And it just overall makes the experience better. For me, I was surprised when I really sat down and looked at it. I put this at an S tier. I think this is such a cool subclass. You have so much versatility. You have, the Codex domain, which is versatile on its own, and you're getting even more of those cards, and you're able to kind of use them even more because you're getting that recall cost down, once per rest, nothing crazy, but it's just adding to your ability. I think knowledge is the closest to what people think of as a traditional wizard, in the fact that you are getting so much more out of just the core game itself. So for me, I'd put it at an S tier just because looking at it of like almost like a meta perspective, like from top down outside the game, like it is just highlighting the game in such a great way and giving you bonuses to just how the game plays.
I couldn't agree more. I don't think there's a single subclass out there that highlights more of the mechanics than School of Knowledge. And just the ability to gain even more domain deck cards is fantastic in and of itself, first and foremost. But to utilize the experiences, which I think there's a fair amount of players that are underestimating how incredible, if depending on how you build your experiences, mind you, how incredible those things can be, because you can take a DC 18 sort of roll that you need for your spell casting and already be starting off with at least a 15 to a 16 from the get go, to the point where you now all you need to roll is 2, and that's the lowest roll that you can make on your duality dice anyways, which would be a crit. Like,
Mhm.
that is insane to me, the fact that you can do that sort of thing if you build your experiences right, of course. But
Yep.
I love the way that it builds, and when you factor in even heritage and everything else, like we did in the video, being able
Yep.
to optimize this class was insane. But I agree, it is an S tier for sure, because there's not a single character concept out there that you couldn't make happen with this particular subclass. There's not a single thing that you're not going to be able to do with this subclass and the class and the domain decks that are picked here. You can heal, you can damage, you can do utility, you can do so much. And even the recovery of certain resources is such an amazing thing to
Yeah.
have at your disposal. Like, this thing is on absolute fire, and I fully agree. It is an S tier, and I think that's where we're going to throw this sucker at. But I suppose that then leads us to the School of War wizard here,
Hmm.
which I thought was interesting in and of itself. I like to see that it's building upon the fear rolls, but it's very circumstantial in that aspect. But it's not trying to get you to stop rolling, because now you're no longer worried if you rolled with fear, particularly during combat more than anything else. This is very much so a combat specific sort of subclass, but I do love all the features that it does have for that. So if you know you're going to be getting into a lot of combat encounters, this is going to be a great subclass, and it's going to be pretty much S tier for those combat encounters. But everything else, the other half of the game, not so much. And so to me, this is going to be an A overall for that very reason. But I love the way that it builds on the fear capability. I love that it gives you more options than just what you're going to get within your domain decks. So it definitely expands your capability and builds upon what you get from the domain deck cards, as well as the class features. So I do appreciate that for this particular subclass. But A tier for me. What would it be for you?
So I really do like the flavor aspect of it. I love a good, battle mage. You are, a beefier wizard than I think is, expected. Again, as we like said about the wizard, it's a very unexpected class, and this one has it kind of built in for you to be that like big battlefield presence while being a spellcaster, right? Just because of the way the game works, like you could absolutely go in full plate armor, pump your thresholds with like, it takes Galapa, build up that heavy armor, right? And you're just become super big and beefy. Uh, for me, I had it at a B tier just because it is so combat focused, and you do have those moments where like you'll suffer from success and you're just rolling with hope, which not a bad thing, right? To just have a bunch of hope, but you're not really capitalizing on your subclass features.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like, being kind of nitpicky on it. At the end of the day, you're, like you said, you're not afraid to roll now. Like you're always getting something. Either you roll with fear and you're getting that extra damage, or you're rolling with hope and you're getting hope, which is never a bad thing to have. You have a lot of things to do with hope. So for me, I put it at B tier, but I think I agree with you. I think this is A tier. Like you're not going to be disappointed playing this subclass. It has a lot going for it in the combat department. You can be beefy, you can be doing a bunch of good damage. Everything builds upon itself, so everything kind of makes sense and it just flows as you're leveling up. And then you have that splendor domain to kind of round out the other side of it. So the only thing you're probably maybe lacking on is a social encounter, but no one expects the wizard to solve a social encounter, so I don't see a problem there with that. So for me, I would agree. I would go with A tier on this one, surprisingly enough.
Yeah, A tier. I do feel it's an A tier, and even when you factor in the Splendor Domain deck into that, it does actually help you with some of the social aspects, or at least investigating for some of those social aspects where you might be lacking overall. So I do like that you do have that at your disposal, which I think kind of helps this subclass be a little bit better, a little bit more than what it otherwise would be, even with the utility that you get from the codex. So yeah, but overall, we've got only three subclasses in the S tier. And then we do have a good amount here in A, only four in B, one C, and one D. So that's actually not too bad overall when we're looking at just subclasses
Mhm.
in general for Daggerheart. I thought that was really great to see that because that's kind of where I was kind of feeling for a lot of this. It felt really good and it just felt satisfying overall for pretty much the bulk of these subclasses. They kind of scratch the itch in those particular ways, but I'm glad to see that there's only really three that are the absolute standouts, the above and beyond sort of subclasses. So, yeah. But what were your thoughts overall for these subclasses when you're looking at the whole?
So I like it makes sense to me kind of where they fall, right? Because I think Daggerheart as a whole isn't a nitty-gritty game as far as like survival goes, right? When I was thinking about it and building it out and thinking about the game as a whole, like I almost expect most classes to be a B or an A, right? Uh, the game is there to highlight the heroic aspect. You're there to tell a kind of a heroic tale, a high fantasy tale, right? So while I say B tier is where a class should be, right? I'm not surprised that there is a lot of B and even A tier subclasses. And not surprised, really surprised at all that there was a D tier subclass, and it really was just from a mechanical aspect. It was just that disconnect from the sorcerer, right? Uh, so overall, I think most of the classes are built well, right? Like uh, we've been pretty honest when we think Sorcerer is it needs a rework of some kind, but everything else I think is sitting right where it should be. It's a good spread. I expect some to be standout. So three S tiers I think is phenomenal because you don't want a game that has everyone at S tier because then nobody's at S tier kind of thing, and then you're just kind of like steamrolling through whatever the GM has prepared. So I like the spread. I think it's a good spread. It's a good heavy mix there in the B and the A.
Yeah, I do appreciate the breakdown that we do have here. I think this is kind of the breakdown you'd want with any game, anyways, is that you do have a few that might not be so great, or at least could give a different sort of flavor for a character, for a particular character concept, if that's what they want to go for. But it's not going to be anything incredible. But at the same time, same goes for like the people that want to just optimize to hell. You only got really three options to be that sort of over the top sort of hero's hero kind of aspect. So I am glad to see this breakdown, and this is what I'd want to see anyways from any game. Because if you do have way too many S's, like you're saying, if you have way too many S tiers, what are we really doing here? It's just too much. It's too powerful. Then nobody's an S tier. You know, it's just that's where it gets unfortunate. Just a little bit, little crazy, but that's okay. So overall, though, I do like these classes. I think without doing like a breakdown for the for each of the classes on top of the subclasses here, I think it kind of speaks for itself almost with the way that the classes actually are, just by the way the breakdown is with each of these subclasses and where they rack and stack in this tier list. So I think overall, though, you're not going to have a bad time, even if you did choose the sorcerer. You're not going to have a terrible time playing this game
Yeah.
anyways. You're still going to have fun. It might not be that like optimal level where you're like super excited about your sorcerer character perhaps, but you're still going to have a good time. You're still going to have an enjoyable time working with the party, doing the things, killing people and just doing crazy damage. So, no matter how you slice it, it's a great time.
It was excited to finally be able to sit there. We did through all these builds. It was nice to finally put a put a bow on it,
Yeah.
see where everybody kind of laid out there. I had so much fun with this series. Looking forward to getting into the more niche builds and stuff like that. But overall, this was a really great to see where how the classes stand up on their own, right? Everybody, I think, has that class fantasy of like, oh, I want to be this paladin sorcerer or this wizard cleric kind of thing, or wizard seraph, what have you. But I like where they all sit kind of individually. I think every class, for the most part, does just stand on its own very well, and I think that's what we kind of got to highlight in this series of just like you don't have to multi-class to just have like a really great solid build, and have a great solid time.
Yeah, I agree about the multi-classing. You don't really have to, but you can, and it just enhances the character. It just enhances your experience at the table. So, absolutely love that these can stand on their own for sure. But let us know down below what you guys thought of where we put each of these subclasses. Where would you put them differently if you could have? What points would you have made that might have brought some of those down or brought some of those up even? Did you agree with us about the subclasses for the sorcerer? Were we maybe a little too harsh? Anything's possible, but let us know down below. I do definitely want to hear your thoughts, so engage with us down below. But until the next one, y'all, keep that shield wall strong.